Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Ask a Property Manager. This is episode number 71. Today is May 19th, 2021. We're coming to you from Studio 2.0 here at Own Buffalo. I'm Andrew Schultz, Principal Broker of Own Buffalo, Inc. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about New York State's Emergency Rental Assistance Program. The funds are finally on the way, kind of. We'll answer some questions from housing providers around the country and so much more. Before we get into that, we are going to go ahead and plug our social media. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager drop every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page. You can catch the replays of these episodes both on Facebook and on YouTube the same day that they are done live. Don't forget to check out our Instagram. And last but not least, don't forget about the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. A new episode of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast does drop tomorrow on Thursday. This week, we're going to be taking a look at how to handle co-signers on leases, the best tips for managing complaining tenants, and drug testing tenants. Is it legal? Don't miss out. New episodes of the Ask a Property Manager show, new episodes of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast drop every other Thursday morning over at rentprep.com/podcast or anywhere podcasts are heard. We're going to go ahead and jump right into our news of the day here. I think this will take up quite a bit of the time of our show today. I want to spend some time talking about the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. This is the rent relief program that's supposed to be what saves us all here in New York State when it comes to getting rent relief funds for some of our tenants. I'm going to preface this episode, and actually I'm going to pop up my legal disclaimer. I'm going to preface this episode by saying that I'm not an attorney, I'm not an accountant, and that you need to speak to your attorney or your accountant before you make a decision on whether or not you as a landlord choose to participate in this program. There are strings attached to these funds. We'll get into that as we go through here. I've got quite a bit of stuff highlighted on this page. You're going to want to make sure that this is the right thing for you to do before you step foot in this arena. We'll go through and cover as much as we can today, but all of the information that I am conveying this episode, all of it's available on OTDA's website. So that's Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, OTDA. You can find this by searching for NYS OTDA ERAP on Google, or you can just go to the OTDA website, which is otda.ny.gov. So that's how you find this information. Everything that I'm sharing with you here today is information that I've pulled from their website, as well as information that I obtained from a webinar that I was in last week. I was fortunate enough to be able to get into that webinar and get some information, but really the information from the webinar is pretty much the same as the info on the website. So this seems to be the best place to go for your information, at least for the time being, and double check anything that I'm saying today against what's on the website. That's all I can tell you. You know, this information may be subject to change. I don't know all the ins and outs of the program either. As a matter of fact, the program hasn't even opened the doors yet. So who knows exactly what this is going to look like when it does launch. Let's go ahead and jump right into this. We are on the ERAP, the ERAP website. Applications will be accepted soon. I'm sorry, I had this actually highlighted earlier and it cleared. Currently, the application process is not open. My understanding is that they expect that this application process is going to open sometime in the next couple of weeks, which is good news. Hopefully they get this squared away. My understanding is they're still working on building out the portal on the back end. Hopefully that's all squared away very, very soon, and this portal is opened up for landlords and tenants to be able to make application. The first part of this video is actually going to be very useful for both landlords and for tenants. If you're a tenant and you're not sure how to go about accessing this assistance, this video is going to tell you more about it. If you're a landlord, you're not sure how to go about accessing this assistance, this video is going to tell you more about it. You both are going to have to complete some portion of the application. And again, we'll get into more details on that. It's not just a landlord-only application or a tenant-only application. I know that there was some discussion about there being an option for landlords to apply on behalf of the tenant. You're still going to need tenant involvement in this situation in order to make this process work. So we'll get into that. I also want to start by mentioning this right here. There were several communities that chose not to go through the New York State program and instead decided to set up their own programs. So if you live in if your rental is in the city of Rochester or Monroe County, city of Yonkers or Onondaga County, town of Hempstead, Islip, and Oyster Bay, you have to apply through your local program. You cannot apply through the state program. There's been a lot of concern over how these local programs are going to run. I guess we'll just have to see how things pan out in that area. Fortunately for us, we're not operating in any of those markets here at Own Buffalo, so this is not something that'll impact our clients. But if you have rentals that are in those areas, you do need to know that you will not be able to use the state program. You're going to have to go through and apply through your local municipality. Just a quick brief look here at some of the eligibility criteria, and I'm not going to sit and spend a ton of time on this, but the thing they are basing everything off of is your household gross income based on the area median income. I went ahead and pulled up the spreadsheet that's available actually on OTDA's website and highlighted the Western New York counties here, just so that you could get a feel for, based on the number of people in the family, the number of people in the household, what are the income limits going to be, earning at 80% of the area median income. So this will give you an idea of what you're looking at on a county by county basis, depending on how many people are living in the household. So those are going to be your income limits for this program. Go ahead and minimize that back down. On or after March 13th, 2020, a member of the household received unemployment benefits or experienced a reduction in income or significant costs or experienced financial hardship directly or indirectly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The applicant is obligated to pay rent at their primary residence, et cetera, et cetera. For the first 30 days, and this is something that I want to spend a couple minutes talking about. For the first 30 days of the program, there is a priority process in place for those tenants who have been most impacted by this situation. The tenants who have basically the worst case scenario type things. Households with income at or below 50% of the area median income, and again, that is your chart right there. So this is the 50% income level. I did not highlight this one, but you can see here with Erie County, this is your 50% threshold, 27,650, 31,600, etc. And then this is your 80%, 44,200, 50,500. So you can see that they do have the charts up on their website showing you what the income limits are and how everything would factor out. So 50% of the area median income, that also include a household member who is currently unemployed for at least 90 days, or is a veteran, or is currently experiencing domestic violence, or is a survivor of human trafficking, or has an eviction case related to their current residence pending in court, or resides in a mobile home, or lives in a community that was disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. There's really no determination for how that's being decided as of yet. Or lives in a dwelling of 20 or fewer units. This is something that I want to touch on because they mention living in a dwelling of 20 or fewer units. In the presentation that I went through on Friday, they said that the landlord will have to attest to owning less than 20 units in the state. So it's not necessarily, at least the way I understand it, it's not necessarily the number of units per building. It's the number of units owned by that landlord, in the state. I don't know how that's going to work when you're talking about units that are owned in different entities. If each entity is considered its own separate landlord, if you will, there's questions to be answered that we're just not there yet. We don't have the answers to those questions. So that's your first priority group, followed by households at or below the 50% AMI without any of the other qualifiers, followed by households at or below 80% that have the qualifier, followed by households with income at or below 80% with no qualifier. Then after the first 30 days, all eligible households will be processed regardless of what is the circumstance, if they have like these extra conditions or whatever the case. After the first 30 days, the extra conditions become irrelevant and everything is processed on a first come, first served basis until the funds are essentially used up. What are they eligible for? So if you're a tenant or if you're a landlord trying to help a tenant get this assistance, the tenant is eligible for up to 12 months of rental arrears for rents accrued on or after March 13th, 2020. I believe that was the first day that they declared the state of emergency here in the state of New York. They're also eligible for up to an additional 3 months of assistance if the household is expected to spend 30% or more of their gross monthly income to pay rent. I believe that's a determination that's being made by the ERAP program. There's also some utility assistance available. We're not going to touch too much on the utility assistance. Payments are going directly to the housing provider, whether it's the landlord, the property owner, the property management company. If it's a utility arrears, it's going right to the utility company so that you kind of get the cash directed directly where it needs to go. Applications will be accepted soon. Obviously, we just touched on this. The applications are not open yet. Here are all of the requirements for a renter. They're going to have their personal identification, their social security, proof of their rental amount, proof of residency and occupancy, proof of income to document the income eligibility. This is where things are going to get tricky, I think, with a lot of tenants. They may or may not have this information. The one thing that is interesting is that they're going to allow tenants to self-attest in some instances with regards to income earned if there's no other documentation available. So it'll be interesting to see when it comes to the self-attestation how that process plays out. It's a situation where on both sides of the coin, there's opportunities on both sides of the coin, both from the tenant side and from the housing provider side, where there could be opportunities for fraud here. And I think that the program will do as much as they can to try to limit that. But there are some opportunities here where fraud could be committed on either side of the coin, which is kind of the entire, the antithesis of what this program is for. So I guess if I had a message on that, it would be, please just do the right thing. And, if you need the assistance, get the assistance. And if you don't need the assistance, leave it for those people that do need the assistance. So we'll scroll on here. And then on the landlord side, you're going to have to complete a W-9. You're going to have to provide an executed lease or some sort of proof that the tenant has been paying rent previously in the unit. So a canceled check, evidence of a funds transfer, other documentation of the last full monthly rent payment. You can provide a ledger or something along those lines. I did confirm that if you have a tenant that's month to month, or even if you have a tenant that's lease has expired, you can provide that expired lease as well as an up-to-date ledger showing that the tenant's still residing there and has rental arrears due. And again, this money is direct deposit, so you're going to have to provide your routing and account number. So here's where things start to get a little bit sticky, and I had this highlighted before, but we'll highlight it again. Here are some of the strings that are attached to accepting these funds from the property owner standpoint. Number one, you have to certify that the ERAP payment satisfies the tenant's full rental obligation for the time period being covered by the payment. That makes sense. If they're going to pay 100% of the rent for 12 months, you have to certify that, yes, this rent covers this period of 12 months back rent. You have to waive any late fees due on any rental arrears covered by the ERAP payment. I'm pretty sure that that was already built into one of the other state statutes. We haven't been charging late fees for a while now, though I think that that part may no longer, that might have been canceled out. They may have let that part of one of the emergency declarations go. You cannot increase the monthly rent above a monthly amount due at the time of application for assistance for 1 year after you receive the ERAP payment. So no rent increases for a year. And here's the real kicker. You cannot evict the household on behalf of whom the payment is made for reason of expired lease or holdover tenancy for 1 year from the receipt of the ERAP payment. An exception to this requirement shall be made if the dwelling unit contains 4 or fewer units and the property owner or immediate family member intend to occupy the unit as a primary residence. So you cannot evict at the end of the lease term. You can't just say, we're not going to renew your lease. We're going to evict you. Like, that's not an option. You have to basically carry this tenant or renew that tenancy at least through a 1 year period from when you receive the funds. That's my understanding of the situation. I don't think that there's anything that would stop you if you're on a 1 year lease that ends sometime in the middle of this 1 year. I think that you could write a short-term lease to cover that remaining 12-month obligation and then make your decision from there. But that's kind of how I understand it based on the information I've been able to obtain either from this website or through that webinar. So that's information on what happens. Those are the sticky parts. Those are the things that the strings that are attached to actually accepting the money. We're going to jump over to the frequently asked section, the frequently asked questions section. I do have some highlights through here. Hopefully they haven't erased. This talks about, again, a little bit more about the eligibility and what's available. So payments made directly to the landlord. Payments will be made directly to the landlord or property owner or utility company on behalf of the tenant. Tenants, landlords, and property managers, utility companies will be notified of the amounts paid on their behalf. If a landlord is difficult to locate or does not provide information needed to complete the application after initial outreach efforts, funds will be held for 180 days to allow sufficient time to locate the landlord and collect the required information, as well as provide tenant protections and maximize landlord participation. Now, the next thing I'm about to say is a little bit of a rumor. I can't verify this. I haven't been able to find any true verification of this. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. But one of the things that has been mentioned to me is that if you refuse these funds, you no longer have the ability to collect on this rent. We'll talk about it a little bit further later, and I think I understand it's not a direct thing, but we'll talk about it here in a couple minutes, and I'll explain why I'm saying that. Basically, we're just scrolling through. There's some more information on eligibility here. For what time period is my household income counted to determine if I'm eligible? So this is on the tenant side of the coin. What are they looking at to determine your income eligibility? And you have a couple of options here. You can go by your current monthly income, or you can go by your annual 2020 income, as stated on W-2 forms from your taxes from 2020, whatever the case may be. So my recommendation to tenants would be look at both options and see what option plays best for you. If you had a job through all of 2020, but you lost your job at the beginning of 2021, I would go by your current monthly income. That's going to provide you the most potential access to the assistance. If you didn't have a job at all in 2020, or like the last half of 2020, whatever the case may be, you might want to look at using your annual 2020 income to see that to get the most benefit available, essentially. So double check your situation to see what makes the most sense for you as a tenant. Here I have highlighted the self-attestation of income is permitted in certain circumstances where no documentation is available, such as certain self-employment. Not a lot of real clear guidance on that yet, either from the website or from the webinar that I went to. We're probably going to have to wait and see how that plays out. Again, from the tenant inside, what income is included when determining my household income from ERAP? They are looking at your gross income, and they're looking at everybody in the household 18 years of age or older. Specifically counted income includes wages, salaries, tips, unemployment insurance benefits, Social Security benefits, retirement benefits, child support, recurring gifts, and other income. Things that are not counted as income are foster care payments, PA, public assistance, SNAP benefits, HEAP benefits, sporadic gifts, groceries provided by persons not living in the household, earned income tax credits, and federal stimulus payments. So your unemployment insurance might count if you were getting an unemployment check, but it doesn't sound like your stimulus payments are going to count, which is probably for the best. I'm not sure on the unemployment if they're going to count the emergency pandemic unemployment assistance. I don't know how that'll work. Again, it's a little bit vague here, at least based on the information that I have available to me. Am I eligible to receive ERAP assistance if I currently have a Section 8 housing voucher or reside in public housing? The language again on this is not super clear, but the way I'm reading it, if you have a loss of income and you have a rental arrears as a result of that loss of income, sounds like you're eligible. I don't think that you're going to be the priority if you already have a Section 8 housing voucher. I don't think that you'll qualify under the first 30 days perhaps. And again, I'm spitballing on that. But it sounds to me as though the Section 8 vouchers will be eligible to make up the difference for the Section 8, whatever the Section 8 doesn't pay that the tenant's responsible for. And this is now moving towards more of the landlord information. Will ERAP help me pay my overdue mortgage payments? No. ERAP's not doing anything for mortgages. This is strictly for rental arrears and utility arrears. Tenants and landlords. Can my landlord apply on behalf of me? The landlord can start the application. The tenant's going to have to provide their proof of income information in order for this process to move forward. Again, I had heard at the onset of this thing that there was going to be a landlord-only application such that landlords could make application without having to go through all of the tenant side stuff. When you have a tenant that's non-cooperative or something like that, the tenant doesn't have the documentation. It doesn't sound like that's going to be the case. The tenant is still going to have to be involved in the process. Hopefully that, works out. I think that given the amount of options tenants have in order to show loss of income and things of that nature, even going as far as the self-attestation model, hopefully somewhere in here we can kind of get this program to work. But if you have a tenant that is non-cooperative, you may still have issues here because you're going to have, an application that the tenant has to fill out in order to make this program work. So we'll scroll down a little bit further. All our locations throughout New York State eligible? No, we already talked about this. City of Rochester, Monroe County, Town of Hempstead, Town of Oyster Bay, Town of Islip, Onondaga County, and the City of Yonkers. You will have your own individual portals. If you go to the OTDA website, It looks like there are already links up here for everything except for the town of Oyster Bay and the city of Yonkers. They may not have their programs up and running yet, but everybody else at least has a link to their program. Scrolling down here, we're talking more about the application process. If a tenant is determined eligible for ERAP assistance and the landlord cannot be contacted to provide their information so that the payment can be issued, the state will hold funds for 180 days. Tenant will receive written notification of the available rental assistance. Tenant should share this with the landlord and, if needed, may provide it to a court as a defense in any proceeding seeking a monetary judgment or eviction brought by the landlord for the non-payment of rent accrued during the time period covered by the available ERAP payment. My take on this is, and again, this is a little bit different than what was originally being discussed, where it's a, if you don't accept these funds, you lose the right to collect those funds. What they're going to do is basically say in court, you were offered X sum of money and chose not to accept that money. And that's going to weigh heavily on your eviction case. So that is something that you're going to need to take into account. Talk to your attorney, talk to your accountant, understand the strings that are attached to this program before you choose to participate or not to participate, and understands what the ramifications of that may be down the line if you choose not to participate. As a landlord, can I apply on behalf of the tenant? You can start the application, but the tenant is going to need to be involved in the process. Are there any terms and conditions a landlord must accept if they choose to receive the help? And again, we talked about this already. You have to certify that it is meeting the obligation for the period covered by the payment. You have to waive late fees due on that arrears for the time covered by the ERAP payment. Initially, I think there was a discussion about this being extended for a 12-month period after the ERAP payment. I don't see that on the website. I did not see that in the webinar. Not increase the monthly rent above the monthly rent due at the time of the application for ERAP assistance for a period of 1 year from the receipt of the ERAP payment. I'm not sure if that means for the covered period. So if you covered, say, April to April, I'm not sure if that means that your timer starts in May, or if it means that you don't get your payment until, let's say, June of this year. Maybe your timer doesn't start until July. That's not really clear to me at this point. And then again, we talked about not evicting the household on behalf of whom the ERAP payment is made for reason of expired lease or holdover tenancy. Doesn't mean that you can't evict for non-payment. Doesn't mean that you can't evict for nuisance tenant. But we all know here in the state of New York, we still have an eviction moratorium that has all but stopped the courts until August 31st. So, you know, if your courts are hearing cases, you may still have an option here if you have a non-paying tenant and you're not, you know, you're going through the program. You need to speak to your attorney on all of this is really what it boils down to. So I think that was pretty much everything I wanted to cover on the ERAP program. Again, this is a very, very unique program. It's the first time that I've seen something this large scale rolled out here in the state of New York for an emergency rental assistance program. I mean, look, it's new to everybody. They're trying to figure it out. The program's not yet open. We're hoping to see the program open by the end of the month. As a matter of fact, we've been told by multiple different sources that it will be open before the end of the month. Today's video is being recorded on May 19th, so there's not a lot of time left in the month for them to get this thing rolling. We have talked about, you know, the fact that they pushed the eviction moratorium, the renewal of the eviction moratorium very, very, very hard. I think one of the reasons they pushed that so hard was because they knew they weren't ready to roll this program out yet. So hopefully New York State gets to that point. I want to see this program roll out. I'm interested to see the experiences of people who do take advantage of this program, to see, you know, how well or not so well the program does actually operate. So that's a lot. That was a lot to cover. We're going to continue, I think. We're going to go in and we'll do the rest of the show. I didn't plan on this portion of the show taking quite this long, but we'll just go with a longer video today. We'll take a look at some humor, maybe break this thing up a little bit. Finally found a house in my price range. I don't know if anybody else is out there actively in the market looking at things, but boy, the pricing is just insane in Western New York and in pretty much every market throughout the country is my understanding. It's just insane. And then you have this sort of a problem with wholesalers. This has become a much bigger problem in the Western New York market as of late, where wholesalers are putting things under contract without really having a good understanding of what it's going to cost to rehab that property. And this was just kind of poking fun at that, but I did get a chuckle out of it. If you're a wholesaler, honestly, the number one skill that I can tell you that you need to develop as a wholesaler is the ability to estimate repairs at least a little bit. Nobody expects you to be exact. Everybody's going to do their own due diligence. But don't come in and say that something, a house that needs a full rehab is only, 10 or 15K of repairs. That's a big issue in Western New York right now. Let's get to our questions from housing providers around the country. Buying a rental property with or without tenants. What do investment buyers prefer, in-place tenants, or do they want to pick their own? We're wanting to sell our 4-unit building and did not renew lease on one of the units. Right about the time we will be putting it on the market will be right when the tenant moves out. We're wondering if it's worth advertising for a new renter or should we leave it for the new owners to find somebody? So there's two schools of thought on this. If you're buying the building and you're financing it, chances are you and your bank are both going to want to see that building full, so it's cash flowing from day one. As a matter of fact, your bank is going to underwrite the building based on the rents, based on the units being occupied. If you're treating this as a true investment property, that is something that gets looked at by the bank. So if you're buying a property and it's tenant occupied, you need to go through and check all of the units thoroughly, have a home inspection done, and ensure the rents are actually coming in. Verify it via bank statement, verify it via a tax return, whatever you have to do to make sure that you're not buying somebody else's headache and you're not buying a building of non-performing tenants. You don't want to buy somebody else's problem unless you're getting that property at a great price and you can afford to deal with those issues both monetarily and in time. So there's two aspects to that. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. If you're buying a building and it has tenants inside of it already, make sure you're doing your due diligence, check the units, check the leases, check the ledgers, and make sure that you are buying a house that has tenants that are actually performing. The flip side of the coin is buying a property with no tenants in it. I always prefer to get a building without tenants in it, especially right now, given the number of headaches there are out there in the world. If you're in a situation where you don't have to buy the building cash flowing from day one, I would take the units vacant. That way I can go in, do whatever work needs to be done to the units to get them up to our level of specification. Now I get to create a full move-in photo set. I have a full detailed move-in photo set of the unit before the tenant moves in, so I know what the true condition was of the unit when that tenant moved in. I won't have that information for tenants that I inherited. I might get a checklist if I'm lucky. I've never gotten photos from somebody showing me what the condition of a place was when a tenant moved in at the time of a sale. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing is you're going to get to screen that tenant on your criteria. So you're going to get to choose the tenant that you want to choose for the unit based on the criteria that you've already determined are most important to you within the letter of the law, within fair housing guidelines and everything else. Doing it the way that you want to do it. That's probably the ultimate. I will share a statistic from COVID, and I've shared some of these earlier in the pandemic, and say that the tenants that we have screened here in our office overwhelmingly outperform tenants that we have not screened in our office. So like a tenant that's inherited at the time of a purchase or a tenant that we inherited when we took over a management contract from another manager, disproportionately, the tenants that we screen in our office do perform better than those other tenants. So good tenant screening is clutch. It's super important. I can't emphasize that enough, which is another reason that I prefer vacant. I would rather put my own tenant in there, and then I understand everything about that tenant, and I have a full set of documentation. Much higher collection rates on tenants that we place versus tenants that we inherit. One final note on this question. One thing that you, as a personality conflict, one thing that you may have happen when you take over a building is you'll get the tenants that'll say, well, the previous landlord always let us do this, or the previous landlord, we've always been doing something this way. You're going to start to have problems like that pop up almost immediately when you take over a building and start running the building your way. So just make sure that you understand how to enforce a lease, how to make sure that the tenants remain compliant with what it is that you're requesting of them, and things of that nature. But you will almost always have situations where the tenants will become annoyed at certain circumstances or whatever the case may be, simply because this is a change. You run things differently than the last person and they don't necessarily like it. So just something to keep in mind. Renter's insurance. I'm doing an open house soon, and I want to tell potential tenants roughly how much it will cost them to have a $25,000 renter's personal property insurance and a $200,000 in renter's liability insurance. I can't seem to find a rough number for that. Any insurance agent I call seems to want my life details before they'll take part with that number. Anyone have a guess? I'm in Medford, Oregon, which is the southern part of the state. So, at least here in New York, a typical renter's insurance policy runs about $125 to $150 a year. We actually recommend to tenants that they contact their auto insurance provider if they have one. Usually they can get like a multi-policy discount or something along those lines. But for the most part, a renter's insurance policy is going to run somewhere around $125 to $150 a year, depending on whatever the limits are. Without spending too much time on this, I'm going to refer you over to episode 350 of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. That was a couple episodes back. We took an extensive look at renter's insurance, what it covers, what it doesn't cover, why it's a good idea. Check your state laws to see what kind of requirements that you can put in place when it comes to renter's insurance. Some states will not allow you to mandate a renter's insurance policy. But if you can, and if the tenant does get a renter's insurance policy, be named as an additional insured or an additional interest on the property for sure, so that you know what's happening whenever there's a change to that policy. But realistically speaking, go listen to that episode 350 of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. There's a ton of information there on renter's insurance policies, and that'll give you a much better, much more rounded education on that topic. Last but not least, tenant complaints about a remodel. My husband and I bought a quad in October 2019. It was fully occupied, and it is near 5 colleges, so most of the tenants were students or teachers. When 2 units became vacant, we decided to do a complete renovation of both. It took about 4 months. I went to show the beautiful, newly renovated unit to a prospective tenant today, and one of the tenants yelled out loudly about how she could smell and hear the noise of the construction over the last 4 months. She and her roommate are not renewing their lease. We plan to remodel 2 other vacant apartments in the future. What can we do to make this a better experience for our current and our new tenants? So first and foremost, this is a communication issue. Notify the tenants of what's going on and how long you anticipate that process is going to be. As far as, the work itself, try to complete the work during normal business hours, or at least during daylight hours when noise is more typically expected. You don't want to have crews in there late at night or early in the morning doing work when you have tenants that are, trying to live their lives essentially. As far as what can you do during the process, maybe add some insulation or add some sort of noise block between the units when you're doing the rehab. I think we talked about that in one of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast episodes as well. Options for foam or options for noise barriers to help kind of dampen the sound between units. Construction is loud. You're going to hear stuff when the building is being operated on. I mean, there's just kind of a fact of life. You're going to hear noise when people are running saws or doing work in a unit. It's just kind of how it is. It's something that a tenant is unfortunately going to have to understand and live with, living in a multifamily property, that there are sometimes going to be inconveniences of other people or loud noises or whatever the case may be. That's kind of part of apartment living. What is she smelling though? That's actually a pretty decent cause for concern, as you're likely going to have smell transfer from unit to unit during the tenancy. So if she's smelling, harsh chemical smell or something like that while you're doing construction work, is she also going to be able to smell cooking smells and things like that from one unit to the next? If that's the case, you might have a situation where you need to figure out where the smell is getting from one unit to another and close those gaps. Spray foam them or whatever the case may be to close those gaps out and make sure that that unit is smell-proof, I guess, for lack of a better term. But that would be, I guess, what I would do during the construction process to try to mitigate those concerns going forward. I would talk to those tenants and ask them to address concerns in a little bit more professional manner rather than yelling them. And I'd also ask them not to do it while I'm showing a prospective tenant the place. Like, just call me or come to me after the showing or whatever the case may be. There's no reason to yell your complaint while I'm trying to show an apartment to somebody else that wants to move into the building, unless you're purposely trying to sabotage the situation. So that would be something that I would pull the tenant aside and say, hey, please don't do that. Let's try to be respectful to one another and we'll figure this out. But it sounds like this tenant's pretty hot under the collar at this point. And I really think that this all boils back to a communication issue. Over communicate whenever possible. I think it'll make your life a lot easier. So that pretty much wraps things up for this week's episode of the Ask a Property Manager Show. Thank you all so much for watching. We truly do appreciate it. We love producing Ask a Property Manager. You can definitely help us to improve. Do us a favor and drop a question in the comments either on Facebook or on YouTube, and your question may be answered in an upcoming episode. If you enjoyed this content, or if we brought some value to your day, do us a favor and hit that thumbs up button. YouTube and Facebook both push videos based on community feedback, so every like, comment, subscribe, and share helps us to grow and reach more people. We'll be back next week on Wednesday, May 26th, 10 a.m. Eastern with another show you won't want to miss. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.